Welcome to Effort Talks. With me is our dear friend Joseph Olmert. He's back again because of popular demand. You know, he is a leading Israeli thinker, scholar, author, professor, served in the Yom Kippur War, has been a peace negotiator. He needs no introduction, so we will dive in. Joseph, welcome.
Thank you so much. Always, the problem really is that you need to have a good interviewer. That's how it starts. Yeah, all the rest of it is, yeah.
I'll try. So,
You got yours now.
Joseph, today we will make sense of tensions within Israel. And there are two incidents, and I emailed both headlines to you. They caught my eye. And one pertains to the Army Defense Minister and the Army Chief's spat. Defense Minister announced on TV that he was replacing the West Bank general, top West Bank general. The Israeli Defense Forces said, no, this is beyond the remit of the defense minister. This general will stay in power. And then, of course, I sent you this study about record Israeli emigration, which is Israelis leaving Israel for the third consecutive year in 2025. Basically correlates completely with the war against Hamas in Gaza. So paint us a picture of first, what is going on between the government and the Israeli Defense Forces?
Oh, that's a great question, and that's a question that has to do with personal issues, but much more importantly with changing political and even ideological landscape in Israel to a large extent, as I will try to explain, and I know that many people don't even think on those terms when they look at all this. First of all, the defense minister, Mr. Katz, well, I would spare any word about him. He's not the right person in the right place. He's a typical appointment of Netanyahu, yes man of Netanyahu. And just 2 days ago, Netanyahu gave him a gift. He exempted him from competing in the Likud party primaries. So he's promised him a seat in the Knesset without needing to stand for primaries because he's become unpopular in the party. So that shows to the relationship between the Prime Minister and Defense Minister.
Sorry to interject. His first name is Israel, isn't it?
Israel Katz, yeah. He exempted him from primaries and gave him back to what he gets from him. So forget about him personally. But here is the problem. The real problem is, in the old days, the traditional Likud party under Menachem Begin, the army, the IDF was sacred to them. So much so that there were also criticism already at that time against Menachem Begin that he gave too much credence to generals, to the army as an institution. And that was a criticism that became even sharper after the Lebanese War of 82, when Sharon and General Eitan, the late General Eitan, the chief of staff at that time, seemed to be doing stuff that was not supposedly in line with what were the political guidelines of Menachem Begin, and so on and so forth. But I would like to go back to the roots of all that.
So may I just stop you 1 second? Ariel Sharon famously disobeyed seniors in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, in which you fought. And if we go back long enough, there was even a brief civil war between Haganah and Irgun, if we are going way
but that's
back.
not the thing. Yeah, the Haganah and Irgun stuff really doesn't belong here. It's an interesting subject because the head of the Irgun, who became later Prime Minister, Menachem Begin,
Exactly, that's why I brought it up.
did admire the IDF. But the reason for that was that from the perspective of this brand of Zionism that Menachem Begin espoused, that's the ideological issue here, the IDF institution seemed to be one of the main features of overall Jewish revival. The Jews have army now.
Yes.
The Jews can defend themselves. This has become, the latest words, the last words of the hero of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, Mordechai Anilevich, were, "I'm dying proud that finally the Jews can defend themselves." So the right wing, so-called, adopted this vision, not as opposed to the Labour Party, by the way. They also accepted it, but Menachem Begin really took it even further beyond that. And now,
so just to stop you, to give context to our viewers and listeners who are not as immersed in Israeli history and Jewish identity, in the Jewish community, there was this widespread sense that they had been weak, they had always been persecuted, and they had never fought back. And the Holocaust really focused.
Exactly. And now there is finally the army and the great generals and so on, Menachem Begin and the entire so-called right wing, the nationalist wing, they really accepted it, What happens now is the 180 degrees opposite of all that because of the complexities of the situation in Judea and Samaria or the West Bank. What happens really is it's another example. It's another example of how the so-called Likud government under Netanyahu, because this is 16, 17 last year, it's like almost like a generation, subjected the overall interest of the state of Israel to the specific interest of the settler community in Judea and Samaria and the West Bank, which is again an ideological issue here, because the same Menachem Begin was the first one to give a push to Jewish settlement in Judea and Samaria after he became Prime Minister in 1977. The first statement he made after he was elected was, there will be many more settlements. It was like. But all that they did at that time was part of a concept which says, this is a national interest of the state. This is an historic right of the Jews. Therefore, everything that we do should be within the context of government interest and policies, which made it easier to a Likud government under Menachem Begin to evacuate the settlements in the Sinai in order to facilitate the peace treaty with Egypt. So he was not against the idea that the same places that we have the right to settle in, we have the same right also to tell them for the overall good of the state, you have to live. And it pained him. Let me tell you, it pained everybody that was around. It pained me personally. It pained my family. It pained everybody that was on that side. Today,
just to stop you, Ariel Sharon, another Likud prime minister, did the same in Gaza. He followed in the Begin tradition, and he took.
I was about to say, Gaza. And then came the disengagement from Gaza. The current government, basically under Netanyahu, the total dependence of Likud on the so-called right-wing parties of the religious right-wing and the Ben Gvir faction, which is also religious, basically. These people really consider the question of settlements in the West Bank, not even the question of Iran, let me tell you, as the main, most important problem concerning Israeli national security. And therefore, everything that happens there in this particular piece of land is the number one priority. And everybody that deals with what's happening there has to follow the idea that this is the number one problem, including, by the way, kind of closing the eyes when settlers behave in a rude, violent, and unacceptable way, which should stop. And there is no one in the government today that can tell these people to stop because Netanyahu depends on them. Now you would say, but there are going to be elections now, it will change. Netanyahu still believes that he would win the next elections. So he still wants to be in an alliance with these people because he believes he will still need them after the elections. And Minister Katz, as being the servant of his boss, of his master, did exactly that. He did not fire the minister. He created the impression that he can do, the general. He created the impression that he could do it. He then explained that he simply said that there was a decision that there would be a replacement of general in the future, right? But yes, you are pinpointing to a real problem here. The problem really here is how the right wing, the national wing in Israel, is changing attitudes from this statehood concept of the centrality of institutions like the IDF, and also, by the way, the security service, and even
Yes.
Mossad, subjecting them to the particular political interest of the government, and in the process, basically attacking institutions that were considered in the past to be sacred. It is like an ideological reversal here.
Yeah.
And that's therefore a very profound problem.
Yes.
That's a very profound problem that will, by the way, cost them in the elections, I believe, because the IDF continues to be the most cherished, admired institution in Israeli society. It's not 100%, not even 90%, but it is 75 or 80% of the people. And what are they doing here? What are they doing here? They are doing the opposite of their own political interests, but they do it because that's their only choice politically. They have no other choice. Netanyahu cannot have any other allies in the political spectrum. Only those people. His doors are closed to any more alliances. The only question now is if after the elections, when the anti-Netanyahu bloc would still have a very narrow margin or more or less 60-60, would they still try to accept Netanyahu after all, despite all that has happened, or try to split Likud and try to pull away from Likud some people, and that is a possibility. But right now, Netanyahu is captive of these people that are based on their electorate in Judea and Samaria.
So here's a question. Judea, Samaria, West Bank, whatever you call it, has lots of settlers. These settlers tend to be religious. These settlers sometimes have a theological view, which means they cannot serve in the IDF. Their view is more theological than national. And I hear there is tension between the IDF and the settlers.
Let's put the record straight. First of all, the biggest settlements in Judea and Samaria are of ultra-Orthodox. Again, something that people don't realize.
Exactly. Please explain. Yeah.
The national religious element in the territories is totally behind serving in the military, and they sacrificed a lot even in the last war, beyond their numbers in the overall population. And one should say, and I'll be the last one to be against them, God forbid. I talk about the overall concept of their interest as a community or as a group as opposed to the overall good of the state. Now, among those who used to support going to the army and still do, a group emerged, what they call the heel youth, the elements that are too radical to stay in their own established communities. They go outside, they establish their own separate communities in which they feel like behaving under no rule, under no procedure, under no even moral value. And they are becoming post, if not anti-Zionist, because they want to see a state that is Jewish state, but Jewish state according to the Jewish religious law. And this is also a beginning.
So let me stop you.
One second. This is the beginning of a split even within these religious Zionists.
Okay. Further fragmentation. So let me stop you because, let me interrupt because you made a very important point, because I am obviously not Jewish, but I have had an interest and fascination with the history of Israel. And what struck me when I used to read about Israel, and especially people like David Ben-Gurion and Golda Meir and all the founding fathers, so to speak, of Israel, and mothers, was that Israel was certainly a Jewish state, but it was a secular state. It was a state based on secular values, at least to begin with.
Yes and no. Yes and no, because the word secular could be misleading here. For example,
please.
For example, if in every door in the entrance of a Jewish home you still have the mezuzah, is it secular or religious? It's a religious symbol. Okay, that defines you as Jewish.
Yeah.
If you get married in a religious Jewish ceremony, are you secular or not? And you know, by the way, many more people now than before are opting for a non-religious wedding ceremony because of their disdain with the institution of the chief rabbinate and all that happens with it.
Understood.
So, look, you can still claim to be secular in many respects, and yet to say, but it should be a state of the Jewish people and the Jewish state because we live by the overall sense that we belong to a nation that is coordinated together by history, also by religion, by language, by legacy, by memories, by all that comes with it. And that makes us a Jewish state in so many respects, and we still understand that if there has to be a day off in the week, it should be the Sabbath rather than Friday or Sunday, and so on and so forth. And, Jewish holidays are still being respected. If you look at Yom Kippur, for example, I think that it's fair to say that a big majority of the people fast on this day, or at least do not act on this day and accept the idea this is a holiday, and so on and so forth. At the same time, there are those who say, okay, so we are a Jewish state, a state of the Jewish people, but we have to respect also the rights of those who want to live their own way. For example, they want to eat pork. Is it okay to grow pigs in Israel? Is it okay to trade with pigs? Is it okay to do this or to do that? For example, there was a big question about what type of food will be allowed into government-run hospitals. Can it be only kosher or also non-kosher? So if you say it could be also non-kosher, you are automatically considered to be secular. But even that is not so right. You can be considered to be somebody who accepts the right of people to live by their own beliefs, which makes you at most a liberal. So therefore these definitions are misleading. However, what may change now is the question of the draft dodging of the ultra-Orthodox. Because that brings to the open again all this vexed question of the relationship between the Orthodox and the ultra-Orthodox and the state as an institution, whether it should be strictly Jewish by the religious law or not, and so on and so forth. You may remember, and as I said before, you are a great interviewer, that when you interviewed me first time after 7th of October, I told you there is going to be the third Israeli Republic as a result of all that.
Absolutely.
That's what is at stake now in these elections. It comes back to what we discussed before. The so-called Israeli right wing, led by Likud, as it seems in the polls, is going to be defeated. Not crushed, but defeated. Still not crushed, but defeated. The question really is what will be the mandate given to the other side, or what they will understand from their mandate to make changes after the elections. And one of the issues that will have to be settled once and for all, two issues is A, the question of draft dodging, all this complication of issues connected with it. And also at the same time, yes, Jews have a right to live everywhere in Judea and Samaria. They have a right to live there, but at the same time, the right to live there doesn't give them rights that are not part of a civilized society. They have to live by the rules of the land. They have to accept their neighbors. They have to behave in a civilized and nice way and all that and so on and so forth. The new government will have to deal with this. They will have to deal with it. And it will be interesting to see who would be appointed by the IDF through the new defense minister to rule over all the situations. That brings it back to where we started.
Brilliant. So let's talk about immigration now. You've touched in great detail about the Israel Katz phenomenon, and you've clearly pointed out that the government, Likud government now, no longer treats the IDF the way Menachem Begin did, and it is subverting this sacred institution for petty electoral gain. Fine, we get that. And this election will be a moment of reckoning for Israel. It's a historic election. Now, this is happening at a time of emigration, and I sent you the story.
Yeah.
The story was that, well, Israelis...
Numbers are
are leaving in record numbers, and this
Yeah.
is for the third consecutive year.
That's
So,
an interesting
so
story.
two,
Yeah.
two things: who is leaving,
Yeah.
which part of the population, and what are the implications for Israel?
I need to tell you that Israel, being a country of immigration, is also by definition a country of emigration. Those who come also leave. And 1966, there was the famous huge recession. It was the biggest recession in the history of Israel. And the joke in Israel at that time was the last person to leave the airport should turn off the lights. So we have had periods of big immigration, and definitely in the last 3 years, according to some statistics, and I say some, I explain why, it's a record number of people leaving, but also there is a question about the statistics, because the question is how they measure it and all that. I want to get into it. I will accept the idea there is a bigger number than any time before.
Yeah.
Also, by the way, there is a big number of people who come back, and immigration to Israel, new olim, as we call it, new immigrants, and other returning Israelis. Who are those who leave? According to what I read and understand, are basically professionals. And obviously, this is the group that would leave, because they are the ones who believe that they could settle more quickly into societies, which
A lot of tech people are leaving, I
a
hear.
lot of tech people, but still, part of the problem is that there is an overall high-tech industry crisis, and a lot of these people will find the new promised land not to be so promising, and they will come back. Also, doctors. But then I read that, as opposed to the large number of doctors who left, also a record number of Jewish doctors made aliyah to Israel, immigrated to Israel in the last 3 years. So the overall trend is not positive. There's no question about that. It is still not changing the fact, still, that overall the Israeli population grows larger percentage point than what it is in the rest of the Western world, but less than what it used to be. So we'll see how it continues. Part of it has to do also with the government in Israel, the sense of revulsion about the growing role of the ultra-Orthodox and all that with this government. So we'll see what happens. What you may be surprised to hear is that there is going to be a very massive in numbers, airlift of Israelis going back to Israel to vote. And I would imagine that most of them will vote against Netanyahu. I don't see any sign yet of counter airlift of ultra-Orthodox going to vote in all this, like they used to do in the past on occasions. So we'll see. So yes, it's a problem. Look, it comes to a basic question, which is a societal, cultural question. How much people can take this constant situation of conflict, tension, and war? The answer is that even if they can't take it so much in Israel, they still do it much more than any other Western country. I mean, the level of drafting to the army among those who don't touch is very high. The rate of voluntarism, and all that comes with it.
No,
but
absolutely.
Less than what it used to be. That's true. It's less than what it used to be.
Look, you made a very good point. I mean, in Ukraine, recruiting is a problem. Often recruiters get beaten up by mobs.
Yeah.
If you had war in America, and if you even suggested draft,
exactly, so
it would be the end of the politician. So compared to that, Israel is a modern Spartan society.
Exactly, that's the point I made. But let me develop it a little bit. It brings me to the point that, in the end of the day, Israel starts behaving like it is a modern, industrialized, developed, not developing, developed country. And therefore, the reactions of some age groups and professional groups in a society like that are not different fundamentally, structurally, than those in other such societies. The numbers, the rate of all this phenomenon is much lesser than what it is. You said Ukraine. I read in one place that almost 10 million Ukrainians left Ukraine during the beginning of the war. It's almost like 25% of the population. So you're talking about different numbers, But I need to say, those who stayed fight bravely.
Of course. Yeah.
Fight bravely.
The Ukrainian forces fight bravely,
So, ironically, Ironically, Ukraine might come out of the war stronger than what it was before, but let's leave Ukraine. With regard to Israel, another point to be made here is very interesting. When you look at the macro statistics of the Israeli economy, it's unbelievable. The most developing, growing economy in the Western world during war. The stats are unbelievable. For example, the foreign currency reserves.
Just tell our viewers and listeners the investment in high tech,
I'll tell you
the
three
economic
numbers.
growth, and
Yeah,
the third,
the
the
high-tech
unemployment rate.
investment
Three
in
things.
Israel in 1 year was $80 billion, 80 billions, higher than the entire high-tech industry all over Europe. The high-tech industry investment all over Europe. The Israeli foreign currency reserves are larger than the overall GDP of some countries in Europe. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I said, what is the growth rate? What is the unemployment rate?
The unemployment rate is marginal. It's something like 3% or 3.5 or, what was the first question? I'm sorry.
Growth, the economic growth.
I don't know the exact figures now. It went up, then it went down a little bit. It goes up again. We'll see, but the economy is doing very well on a macro level, and still people feel uncomfortable. So that brings me back to the point I made before about the similarities with other Western societies, where the expectations of people are not anymore just the bread and butter, but also the overall quality of life that is attached to it. And when you have
very quickly, Joseph, I looked up the growth rate, 3% last year. It's pretty good for an advanced economy.
Yeah, okay. I thought it was a little bit less than that, so that's why I wasn't sure about that. But okay, so the point really is that the question to be asked really is, this is for another program maybe, but can't do it in 1 or 2 minutes, is what really creates the overall sense of satisfaction of societies in a situation like that, in a democratic, Western, modern, industrial country and culture like Israel is. And apparently bread and butter is not the only one, because those who leave are mostly the ones who are enjoying from the overall economic, what they call the economic miracle of Israel, So that's an interesting question, and it may be a worrisome question to ask if you're Israeli, because it may be the first time that a growing number of people are touching upon the very fundamentals of a siege society. Whereas in the past, the idea of a siege society was like the cementing glue of Israeli society. It's becoming less so now. But still, it is far different what you have in other societies. And you mentioned Ukraine, so, it's a good example because there is a war there. And by the way, don't even mention Russia with all that happens there. I mean, as far as we know, the overall moral, cultural, and collapse and so on and so forth, let alone the poor performance of the army, which indicates, among other things, low level of motivation. I'm a great fan, surprised to hear that, of the Red Army of the Second World War, because
they were phenomenal.
Yeah, they saved. Let's face it. Look, the West, but they, and
the way they fought at Stalingrad.
Exactly. So you can't even compare it to what's happening now. So you see like a decay, and it's if people say that it is the beginning of it in Israel, I would call attention to the fact that it is far from being like that, and what will happen in 5 or 15 years' time. You know what? We are two young people. We'll talk about that at that time.
Excellent. So what you said, to just what I took away from your comments, was that the siege mentality. Israel has always been a country under siege.
Maybe too problematic to growing number of people than opposed to
and the siege mentality, the siege phenomenon that cemented Israeli society might be
weaker. The bonds here may get weaker than what they used to be, but it is still, in a way, far different than what you have in other countries. So I would leave it at that and don't call too much into it. Let's wait a few more years to see
and watch
the trend, or that's why I gave an example of 1966. Because everybody who remembers the big recession of the 60s and the jokes about, Israel population now is 3 times or so larger than what it was then, so
Yeah.
it gives you a sense, yeah.
Brilliant. Joseph,
Thank
thank
you.
you very, very much for your time. We'll have you back. Lots of things to unpack.
Well, I understand, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. Take care, my friend. You're doing a great job. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.